Thank you, Kim. I'm joined today by Dean Bushey. He's the Vice President of Hitachi's Global Social Innovation Business. Dean, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you share with us what kind of trends in transportation we should expect to see after this pandemic ends?
I think the trends that you're going to see after the pandemic are the same trends that started before the pandemic. I think the pandemic has only served to accelerate some of the digital innovations trends that we saw in transportation before. People, if you look at the customer first, you need to understand that the customer wants to feel safe and secure, first of all. That may mean touchless payment systems, route optimizations, apps, and digital information they can have at their fingertips that make them feel safe and secure. Secondly, they want to move through the system very efficiently. How can I get from point A to point B and understand what the schedule is, understand what the disruptions on the routes are, understand what my options are, maybe even understand what the carbon impact of my routes may start to be as we move towards an EV world. And then the last thing is it needs to be efficient for all players. It needs to drive business. So I think those trends that started before have only been accelerated by digital innovation. And I think COVID has actually accelerated those trends.
So Hitachi, you've got a social innovation business. It's focused primarily, as I understand, on improving quality of life kind of broadly across the entire planet. How does Hitachi plan to use technology, whether existing or future, to improve transportation and infrastructure broadly?
It's a great question. It's one of the reasons I really love working for Hitachi, especially social innovations business, because our mantra, as you mentioned, is to improve the environment, to improve society, and to drive business. So in that vein, we're looking at ways we can digitize this transition to EVs, whether it's a total cost of ownership analysis on, hey, you can actually convert to EVs, you can convert your fleet. It's maybe we need to improve the infrastructure, the EV infrastructure, whether it has to do with chargers, or it has to do with an EV fleet, or it has to do with what are we going to do with the batteries when the batteries go out of cycle? How are you going to recycle those batteries? Those are all impacts on the environment that we're going to use digital technologies to improve. One example is Penske. We're teaming up with Penske to help improve the reliability of their fleets. Potentially need to know what's going to happen with maintenance examples. We can use digital predictive maintenance models to say, this is when this bus or truck may fail. This is what you need to do. So we can get ahead of the game and not just be prescriptive, but be predictive in the maintenance cycle.
Presumably there's a lot of work going on when it comes to the huge fleets we see for some of these e-commerce giants as well, figuring out how they can become more efficient.
Yeah, so the explosion of e-commerce is only going to accelerate the growth into last mile delivery. And I think that's one of the major markets. I understand long haul trucking, but the last mile delivery that you see out in your neighborhoods is going to explode. And I think that's one of the first ways we're going to see a transition to EVs. And that's where Hitachi is using their digital technology to improve not only the routes, but to transition to EVs on those fleets.
And you're obviously working with all these other companies out around the world on these kinds of innovations. It seems like your business is making progress when it comes to decarbonization, when it comes to things like sustainability. What do you think is necessary to push those kinds of ideas forward at other organizations around the world, whether those you work with or those you'd like to?
Right, you bring up a good point. It's an ecosystem, right? It's not just one company going out there and solving the problem. It's Hitachi working with Amazon, working with all these global leaders to come up with solutions for customers. You got to put the customer first. It's not me selling a Hitachi brand. It's us coming together. Well, first part of it is to make sure that the public is educated about the impact they have on their daily life, has on society, and has on the environment. Whether it's the car they drive, how many miles and how hard they drive it, what type of car they drive. Maybe it's the airplane ride that you took. You would be very surprised at how much carbon you're burning on the airplane. Maybe it's the food you choose to eat or the water you drink. Each one of those has a carbon price tag. Same with a hotel room. So one is to educate the populace that you, in your individual life, you can make a difference and you can drive environmental impact. The second thing is to make sure that businesses understand when we come together, we can drive new innovative digital solutions, not only drive business, they are profitable, but it also is good for the environment. It used to be, I have to decide whether to be sustainable and make it very costly, or I have to be business savvy. Now you can be both, and we can come together and make it a much better place and drive business.
Well, Dean, unfortunately, that's all the time that we've got right now for this conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us, Dean Bushey.
Thank you.